You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's now talk about where Syracuse was right and wrong in the transfer portal this offseason. Now, they didn't get a lot right, but they did get one thing, so credit to Syracuse on this. Apparently, Syracuse targeted a center from Ole Miss at the time named Moussa Cisse in the transfer portal. The Orange were interested in him, and then they balked at his asking price when it was at reportedly $1 million before he ultimately decided to go with Memphis. Now, would Cisse have made the team better? Sure. He's a good center. He's good. He's a good defender, at least. I believe he was an all-conference defender at one point in his career. But he averages for his career 6 points and 6 rebounds. You do not pay $1 million for a center that averages 6 points and 6 rebounds. You better be Dikembe Mutombo as a defender, or else you're totally not worth $1 million. So Syracuse did get that right. In fact, we learned how much Eddie Lampkin is worth in his NIL deal, $850,000. I would rather have Eddie Lampkin at $850,000 plus an additional $150,000 in NIL available compared to Moussa Cisse. So I think that Syracuse basketball got that part right in the portal. And for those that are saying, well, Eddie Lampkin's worth too much, if you think Eddie Lampkin is worth too much money, right, or is not worth $850,000, then you think that centers in general in the transfer portal are worth too much, because centers in the portal are the most expensive position compared to anyone else. They are. A middle-of-the-road center is going to cost a ton of money, as we saw with Eddie Lampkin. Frank Anselem, who we detailed in the last segment, makes more money than J.J. Starling, and he is a third-string center at Louisville, and he is not very good. He's never averaged, I think, 3 points a game in a single season. He stinks, and yet he's making $300,000 plus. So centers in general are worth more than probably what they should be. So Eddie Lampkin at $850 is actually not bad value compared to everyone else. And I'd rather have Eddie Lampkin at $850 plus an additional $150,000 than Moussa Cisse. So Syracuse got that part right. But they did get one thing really, really wrong. What if I told you that Syracuse could have gotten Malik, Mack, and Dakota Leffew? What if I told you that? What would you think? Those were two pretty good players in the portal. Malik Mack overall was one of the best players in the portal. He was an all Ivy League player in his true freshman season. And I know you're going to sit here and tell me you don't want mid-major players, but he's actually having a pretty good year at Georgetown, averaging 13 points and 5 assists per game. Georgetown plays in the Big East. That's a power conference in college basketball. That's pretty good. He translated quite well. He's not perfect, but Syracuse could have maybe had him. And they could have had Dakota Leffew. I get that he's coming from Mount St. Mary's, but he's at Georgia right now, averaging 10 points a game off the bench in the SEC. It's not bad, right? I think Syracuse would have been a better team with Malik Mack and Dakota Leffew. Well, they could have had them both. So we know from the article that Syracuse offered Dakota Leffew anywhere between $250,000 and $300,000 for him. He ultimately decided to sign with Georgia for $400K, give or take. Malik Mack decided to go to Georgetown at give or take $400,000. So Syracuse basketball was interested in both of these players, Malik Mack and Dakota Leffew, and they would have cost them in the neighborhood of about $800,000. Now, you could sit here and say, well, just don't sign Eddie Lampkin and go get those guys, right? Because Eddie Lampkin was at $850,000. You could say that, but Syracuse did need a center in the offseason, so they had to spend to get one. Here's how Syracuse could have gotten Malik Mack and Dakota Leffew. It's pretty simple. Number one, you don't sign Jaquan Carlos. You don't sign Lucas Taylor. And if you want to throw in Peter Mastorovich as well, fine by me. You don't sign those guys, so you save that money. You give them to Dakota Leffew and Malik Mack. And number two, you offer that $700,000 that you apparently had available for Kadary Richmond to those two players. That would have been enough to potentially get Malik Mack and Dakota Leffew. There's no guarantee that they would have come and said yes. There's no guarantee, but I guess that goes to show you that Syracuse just, whatever money they did have, they spent it really poorly. That's clear. They spent it poorly because they could have had them. That part really pissed me off. Those guys only combined for about $800,000. You had it. You had $700,000 for Kadary Richmond. You paid Jaquan Carlos and Lucas Taylor. That's $800,000. You had it. It's right there. And I understand that, well, you wanted to save that Kadary Richmond money in case you actually got Kadary Richmond, right? Because you'd rather have Kadary Richmond. Here's the issue. You weren't in the ballpark for him. It's one thing if you had $700 only for him and Kadary Richmond goes to St. John's for, I don't know, $750. I get that. Like, you're close. You're in the ballpark. You could have gotten him, but you're not even in the same area code for Kadary Richmond. And by the way, Kadary Richmond was rumored to be entering the portal for over a month. You should have at least known what he was going to be asking for and should have known that $700,000 was not going to be enough to get him. They really could have just taken that money and funneled it to other players. It doesn't even have to be Malik, Mack, and Dakota Leffew to improve the backcourt. It could have been anyone in the backcourt that they could have given it to. So overall, it's just they got that entirely wrong. They got it wrong. That's pretty clear now. They're not a good team.